Hello everyone, you are listening to Scenecraft. From opening shots to long takes and epilogues, we examine our favorite scenes from cinema here on the podcast. I'm Cody, here with my fellow Fremen,
Mark,
and Connor.
You can find Scenecraft on most social media platforms at Scenecraft Podcast for the latest news on the show. Today, we'll be discussing Dune Part 2, directed by Denis Villeneuve. And we are so excited to have cinematographer Greig Fraser join us at the end of the episode for his pro take on the film. But as always, let's begin with our brief What We've Been Watching segment, Quick Takes.
Speak quickly.
Quickly, thank you.
Quickly, come on. Hurry up, quicker.
Way quicker.
Okay, I'll say it fast.
So what have you guys been watching?
All right, I'll start us off with Drive Away Dolls, which was directed by Ethan Coen and was released this year, 2024. The logline reads, Jamie regrets her breakup with her girlfriend, while Marion needs to relax. In search of a new start, they embark on an unexpected road trip to Tallahassee. Things quickly go awry when they cross paths with a group of inept criminals. So, you guys know this about me. I'm a simple guy. And by that I mean, I see one of the Coen brothers is making a new movie based on original IP, and I'm sold. And this is actually Ethan Coen's solo directorial debut, and he wrote this with his wife, Trisha Cook. The premise is simple enough. It's set in 1999 and follows two lesbian characters as they embark on a road trip to Florida, and they're unaware that their car contains a suitcase with highly sought-after items. And I thought this movie was fine. I was definitely probably the most enthusiastic. I feel like I was praising it before it even came out, and I feel like you guys were definitely less interested in it. So perhaps it's a case of having too high of expectations. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly raunchy, but not nearly as comedic or thrilling enough to make much of a splash. So it feels kind of like it lands somewhere in the middle. And there's some puzzling editing choices, and I also feel like some of the reveals feel like they were better executed in other Coen brother movies. In fact, I feel like this movie is actually evidence that the magic of a Coen brothers film, such as No Country for Old Men, Fargo, or The Big Lebowski, is the result of the perfect alchemy between both of the brothers' sensibilities. Ethan appears to be more zany of the two, while Joel seems more stoic. And together, I think they kind of balance each other out. And so I feel like Drive Away Dolls is unfortunately not that.
Right.
So I wouldn't go out of my way to recommend this, but if you're semi-interested, I'd say wait until it gets onto the streaming platforms.
I think it sounds like a really fair assessment of the movie from you. Like after hearing that, I feel like I know exactly what I'm going to get. And
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, I may skip this one, but I'm glad you watched it for the group.
Mm-hmm. I also watched Shortcomings, which was directed by Randall Park and was released last year, 2023. The logline reads, a trio of young Bay Area urbanites navigate a range of interpersonal relationships while traversing the country in search of the ideal connection. So I kind of mentioned in the last review, expectations, I feel like play a role into our assessment of a film. And for this one, I wouldn't say my expectations were super high. I watched this one with my wife, and we decided to watch a rom-com. And I saw this was the directorial debut for Park. And I've enjoyed him on Fresh Off the Boat, Ant-Man, and a couple other films.
Yeah.
And so I decided to give it a shot.
Yeah, he's great.
I don't feel like the logline really explains what the movie's about. So basically, the main character is this film snob.
Sounds familiar. Just kidding. Sorry. Just had to throw that in.
You would, if they showed him like on Letterboxd, I would have been like, you guys need to watch this. But essentially, it's everything up until that. But
Okay.
yeah, you guys will definitely appreciate that if you end up watching this. So basically, the main character is this film snob whose girlfriend leaves to New York for an internship and decide to put their relationship on hold while they are apart. And I feel like we get a pretty good sense of navigating the dating world in a way that feels honest. For instance, not every interaction with the opposite sex necessarily leads to a relationship. And I think we've all kind of grown accustomed to that in movies where you kind of know who they're going to end up with. I also feel like I got quite a few laughs from it too, and I really appreciated the sharp script and the subversion of some of the genre's tropes. I will say that this really tests the limit of how insufferable a main character can be.
Oh, okay.
He's not the most likable protagonist, but he does feel like a real person. So that'd be my only hesitation. But I would recommend giving Shortcomings a shot, and it's currently streaming on Netflix.
How long is this one, Mark?
So the movie's, I think, 90 or 92 minutes from what I remember reading. So it's in that sweet spot.
Yeah, sounds like a breezy comedy watch.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
I might check this one out.
Yeah. What about you, Connor? What have you seen recently?
So I recently watched The Piano Teacher, directed by Michael Haneke from 2001.
Ooh.
The logline reads, "A young man romantically pursues his masochistic piano teacher."
Okay.
So that logline is like summarizing Jaws as three men hunt a shark. It, it reminds me of those log lines that are so hilariously oversimplified. Like, I guess it is an accurate description of the plot, but it just leaves out so much of the film's complexity. I watched this one on a recommendation from our friend, Harry, a friend of the show. And boy, oh boy, I sort of knew what I was getting into, but I was not prepared for just how unpleasant this movie is. For anyone unfamiliar, Haneke is an Austrian filmmaker, and making challenging films is basically his MO.
Yep.
Pick any one of his movies, and you're guaranteed at least one or two jaw on the floor type moments of unforgettable shock, and not in a good way. The Piano Teacher is full of those moments that I won't be able to unsee anytime soon. All that being said, good art makes you think, demands something of its audience, and sometimes it uses uncomfortable methods to make a point. While the subject matter and behavior of the characters in this film is definitely extreme, to say the least, I found the commentary on control and human nature more powerful because of that extremity. So both Isabelle Huppert and Benoit Magimel, who we last talked about in The Taste of Things,
Nice.
they won Best Actor and Best Actress at the Cannes Film Festival, and the movie itself won the Grand Prix, all in the same year.
Wow.
It's been said that Huppert's performance as Erika Kohut is one of the greatest performances of all time, and I have to agree after seeing it. I would very, very cautiously recommend watching The Piano Teacher if you're interested in expanding your world of film, but just know it is like the polar opposite of easy viewing, like we just heard in Shortcomings.
So Shortcomings is going to be the chaser.
Yeah,
Is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's probably what it would be. So this next one's been on my list for a while, but I finally watched Atlanta, Donald Glover's TV series that ran on FX for 4 seasons from 2016 to 2022. The logline reads, Ern and his cousin Alfred try to make their way in the world through Atlanta's rap scene. Along the way, they come face to face with social and economic issues touching on race, relationships, poverty, status, and parenthood. We're in the middle of the 3rd season, but I've really been loving this show. It follows an interesting, non-traditional format where each episode is actually a bottle episode based on a single day or maybe like an event in the characters' lives that provides a snapshot of where those characters currently are. So things are referenced between episodes, but it's not like a fully linear structure where storylines continuously progress from one episode to the next. We might have one episode fully focused on 2 characters and then not see them again for another few episodes. Because of that structure where we zoom in on a single day or an experience, the city of Atlanta really explodes to life instead of just simply being a backdrop for the show, which I really love. And for example, in my favorite episode so far, the whole 30-minute episode is dedicated to the character Alfred just trying to get a haircut at his barbershop. It's an amazing way to showcase the unique culture surrounding the experience of black barbershops as an entire world in and of themselves. This show is super funny, smart, thought-provoking, and poignant. At its best, it feels very real, too, which is what I love about it the most. So if you haven't seen it, I'd highly recommend checking out Atlanta on Hulu.
Yeah, it's funny you should bring this up because I've been watching Community right now with Donald Glover,
Nice.
and he is so great in that. So I'll have to check this out as well.
Yeah, and just thinking about some of the biggest shows in our lifetime, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Mad Men, all FX shows. So I was like, I need to watch Atlanta. Like they really know what they're doing on that network.
Hmm.
Cody, what have you been watching?
So recently I had a chance to see Wonka. I watched it at home. This was directed by Paul King, came out towards the end of last year. It's Mark's number 3 film of 2023. The logline reads, with dreams of opening a shop in a city renowned for its chocolate, a young and poor Willy Wonka discovers that the industry is run by a cartel of greedy chocolatiers.
Huh. Weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even know that was the premise. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting premise, and because of that, I'm pretty torn on the film because on one hand, I really do think everyone in Wonka is giving it their absolute all, turning in ridiculous performances, especially Olivia Colman, who I know we all love on the podcast, and
Oh, yeah.
Tom Davis, her counterpart in the film.
Mhm.
There are some really catchy songs and musical numbers, and then when the sets are real, they feel very vibrant and lived in. But on the other hand, the plot is strangely convoluted. It's like robbing Peter to pay Paul for like almost 2 hours. And I think the story beats and the sheer number of characters could have been streamlined significantly just to make this feel a bit more, fast paced, pure, whimsical. Wonka definitely has heart and tries to do something wacky and fun. I will give it that, but I just wouldn't recommend it unless you have maybe elementary school aged kids. Then it might be a nice family watch, but I just didn't think it was doing enough to warrant bringing back this character, which was already kind of mastered by Gene Wilder.
Mhm.
I will say cartel of greedy chocolatiers kind of like sells me a little bit.
Yeah. It's an interesting plot point for sure that I was not aware going in. So, I mean, check it out. It's not it's an easy watch and it's fun. I wouldn't like solidly recommend it to anyone in my sphere. So, I don't know.
I hear you.
I'd be curious to hear what you think.
So maybe what you're proposing is you start with Shortcomings, then you watch The Piano Teacher, and then you watch Wonka. Just make a sandwich out of it.
Yeah.
There we go.
That would do it.
So wait, Mark, you haven't seen this? You just like made a joke of it for our top 10?
Yeah, I have not seen this movie.
Oh, that makes it even funnier.
Then I also had a chance to see Nyad, directed by Jimmy Chin and Elizabeth Chai Vassarelli. This also came out in 2023. The logline reads, the remarkable true story of athlete Diana Nyad, who at the age of 60, and with the help of her best friend and coach, commits to achieving her lifelong dream, a 110-mile open ocean swim from Cuba to Florida.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wild. And my viewing experience on this one was wild, very strange. But I think it's one of those cases where the circumstances you watch in, we talk about it on the show a lot, can really determine your enjoyment for a film. So my wife and I were experiencing rolling blackouts at our house during a recent atmospheric river in California. So that evening where it was the worst, in the chaos of rain and wind, I stupidly decided to drive to a nearby cafe, which was actually closed for the night. And I sat outside on this like wet bench that was getting soaked and connected to the cafe's public Wi-Fi. And so just sort of hunched under this flimsy awning that was like leaking all over me. I loaded up my iPad with as many shows and movies as I possibly could before the storm knocked out power to the cafe. So then I quickly drive home, and we chose to kind of settle in for the storm and watch Nyad. Our struggles were nothing compared to Diana Nyad's in the film. And while I think this movie did take a hit when it came out for some of its creative choices, such as slightly pandering flashback sequences, At the end of the day, this is an incredible story about a ruthless individual who sacrifices her well-being and relationships for what she believes is her destiny. And the weight of that sacrifice and turmoil is well performed by Annette Bening in the role. And then, of course, we have MVPs of the film, Jodie Foster and Rhys Ifans. The husband-wife team of Chin and Vasarely brought us Free Solo, which everyone loved, Oscar-winning. So I think Nyad is worth checking out on Netflix, if nothing else, just to learn about this massive achievement.
I love that story, Cody.
Yeah. I feel like a good example of the work that we put in sometimes to make movie watching happen here on the show.
Yeah, that's what I'll classify it as, rather than stupidity, like driving in a horrible storm.
It's just dedication.
Well, thank you guys. And now let's move into our discussion about Dune Part 2, starring Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Austin Butler, and Florence Pugh, among many others.
Don't try to impress anyone. You're brave, we all know that. Be simple, be direct. Nothing fancy.
Nothing fancy.
Hey, I'm serious. Nothing fancy, or you will shame my teaching.
I won't shame you. I understand.
The logline for the film reads, Paul Atreides unites with Chani and the Fremen while on a warpath of revenge against the conspirators who destroyed his family. Facing a choice between the love of his life and the fate of the known universe, he endeavors to prevent a terrible future only he can foresee. Quick reminder that at the end of the episode, we have cinematographer Greig Fraser joining us for his pro take. But let's get into the film and start with our spoiler-free section. Mark, what did you think of Dune Part 2?
I'll start off by saying that I was probably the least hot on Dune Part 1 out of us three.
I know.
I saw it once in theaters, and I remember reaching a point in the movie, which is very exposition heavy, and it needs to be, where I kind of shut down. And everything beyond that point seemed incomprehensible, and the film didn't feature a ton of action. So it led to kind of a middling experience. I still appreciated it, but I wasn't, as big of a fan as you guys were. I ended up rewatching Dune Part 1 in prep for Part 2, and I must say I enjoyed the hell out of it a lot more this time around.
Nice.
Thank God.
And I think this will probably disgust a lot of listeners out there, but I actually found the ability to use subtitles and pause the movie to look up terms immensely helpful, and I think it added to my enjoyment of the experience.
Yeah, I see that.
Yep.
That being said, I felt primed and ready to go for Dune Part 2, and I would strongly recommend anybody listening to rewatch Part 1 in order to get the most out of your experience. Another tip would be to see this film on the biggest screen possible. I saw this film in IMAX, and it was a tremendous experience.
Yes.
Whereas in the first film, I feel like there was a lot of table setting. Part 2 really allows the characters to gain greater depth as we focus on Paul Atreides' ascent to power and his relationship with Chani. It was such a thrill to return to this world, and at the same time, I had a level of comfort knowing that we were in good hands with Villeneuve. This one was a home run for me. Connor, what did you think?
So I think we need to address the elephant in the room. And by that, I mean the Dune popcorn bucket. I know both of you basically can't watch a movie in the theater without popcorn, which is a discussion for another day.
Yep.
Did either of you get the bucket?
Well, it's funny you should say that.
Oh,
I have
there
the
it
bucket
is.
right here. I know everybody listening
Wow.
can't see it, but I
Wow.
did get a Dune 2 AMC commemorative Sandworm bucket.
Amazing. And is it a tub or a bucket?
Yeah, I was going to say, Mark, can you go ahead and just describe what we're seeing on screen here that the listeners at home cannot?
Sure, I'll do my best here. First, I think we do have to parse out whether it's a bucket or a tub. The word tub just conjures a lot of gross things, so I'd rather call it a bucket.
Saltburn.
Saltburn, yes. So the bucket is like a metallic, just normal popcorn bucket, but it's got this unique top to it of a sandworm bursting out with its mouth open and you see all its teeth. It went viral for very obvious reasons if you see a picture of what it looks like. So go ahead and Google that if you haven't seen it yet.
Mark, what does it feel like when you put your hand in? And how easy is it to take popcorn out of
That's
it?
what I was curious about. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is really weird, but it's a little more cramped. It's a little tighter than I was expecting. It's a little bit of a fight to get that popcorn out. So, yeah, it's a harrowing experience. I think it would pair nicely with some of the scenes in this movie.
Okay. Cool.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Mark, I'm also glad you brought up how important it was for you to rewatch Dune Part 1 ahead of this movie, because I wish I did. So I'll just underline your advice. Unless you're already a fan of the book and know the world of Dune pretty well, I think you really need to have Part 1 fresh in your head for the best experience. I caught myself getting distracted at times trying to remember details and characters' names, etc., instead of just writing with it, so I definitely wish I rewatched it ahead of this movie. I just kind of ran out of time. That aside, it did not hamper how easy it is to enjoy this film. I would describe Dune Part 2 as an experience more so than a movie. There are only a few filmmakers really pushing the boundaries of cinema in terms of scale, and Villeneuve is definitely one of them. Everything is just massive in this, and I found myself shaking my head in disbelief from a creative standpoint, wondering how a director could even pull something like this off, let alone to do it so masterfully well. This was my most anticipated film of 2024, and it absolutely delivered. It's an incredible achievement, and it captures that magic of cinema that we all love. I hope we get Dune Part 3 to complete the trilogy, but this was well worth the wait after Part 1. Cody, what about you? What did you think?
I've been a huge fan of sci-fi and fantasy as long as I've watched movies, but for the longest time, Frank Herbert's 1965 Dune novel was a huge gap in my reading repertoire, even though all this time the subject matter seemed like something I would love. So leading up to Villeneuve's Dune in 2021, I finally decided to fix that and listen to the audiobook. And among the first pages, you encounter parlance like Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit using a Gom Jabbar and testing the prospective Kwisatz Haderach, who recently watched film books about the Fremen and Shai Hulud on the planet Arrakis.
Wow.
So from the beginning, you're just buried in this deep lore. And while Herbert does a groundbreaking job with his world building, the prose can be really unforgiving and dense. So at the time, I barely muddled through that audiobook, and I just didn't retain it at all. Then I saw Dune Part 1 by Villeneuve, which instantly became an all-time favorite sci-fi film for me. Connor, I remember seeing, I think, my second or third watch with you and my brother in Chicago. I was so inspired by that experience that I tried the novel again. Still didn't click for me, even with the context of the film. All this time, this has been so frustrating because I really wanted to love it. So recently I tried one last time while preparing for Dune Part 2, and happy to say the switch finally flipped, I think, where I could really enjoy immersing myself in this dense desert world of the novel. But I think it's shown me just how brilliant Villeneuve's adaptation is. Dune Part 2 actually edges out Part 1 for me, which I was already obsessed with because Part 2 is able to retain so much weirdness while also scaling the thick exposition of the novel into multiple thrilling set pieces, more than the first film, and takes creative liberties based on intricate book details. For example, sapping color from an entire sequence because of a planet's low level of photosynthesis as described in the book. It's clear that Villeneuve is a lifelong fan of Dune, and I'd say his adaptations turned me into a fan as well. I loved Dune Part 2. It's a feast for the senses, and I am very excited to dive into our scene selection, which we're going to call Riding the Sandworm. And as usual, beware of spoilers ahead.
Is there anyone there?
Yes, what do you see?
Spoilers! Right ahead!
Thank you.
Connor, would you like to give us the scene beats, please?
Sure, I'd love to. A lot of weird words in here, so bear with me. This scene takes place about 50 minutes into the film, and it lasts for 7 minutes. Paul Atreides, played by Timothée Chalamet, is now known as Muad'Dib to the Fremen people on Arrakis after learning their language and customs and successfully leading attacks on Harkonnen operations. Only one test remains before Paul can be considered a fully fledged Fremen, riding a sandworm, also known as a maker or Shai Hulud. Paul is surrounded by his fellow Fedaykin warriors and is coached by Stilgar, played by Javier Bardem, to efficiently mount a sandworm and remember his teachings. In this epic sequence, Paul uses a thumper to summon a surprisingly massive grandfather sandworm, they call it, and with huge effort is able to grapple onto the creature and complete his final test. Not only is Paul's status as a Fremen now cemented, but his reluctant path as a messiah becomes clearer than ever before.
Nice. So let's talk about this scene on the whole and why we chose it among so many great scenes in the film. There are choices in theme, character, and craft that make Paul's final test so memorable. This is a major turning point in the film because, yes, while we've seen Paul adopt the culture of the Fremen and, quote, know their ways as though born to them, unquote, riding and making peace with a sandworm is a rite of passage. It's a crucial benchmark to help secure the trust and admiration of these people, most of whom now definitively believe in a prophecy where Paul and Jessica will lead them to freedom and paradise. And from a character perspective, that theme is best visualized by Javier Bardem's final line in the scene, where he says, quote, as written, with a look of astonishment as if he's seeing a miracle before his eyes. And then meanwhile, the scene also starts to plant seeds of growing concern from Chani, played by Zendaya, who is among the most secular of the Fremen and thinks that this prophecy is manipulative and dangerous, but while still loving Paul. And finally, there's the craft of the scene, which we'll dig deep into, but needless to say, it's all visualized on a scale I don't think any of us have experienced before. How did this scene make you guys feel in your IMAX experience?
So Mark and I actually saw this together, and I think right after it was done, Mark leaned over and said, like, that's the scene that we need to cover. So, which I agree. I mean, this gave me chills when I saw it. It's definitely something I've never seen before on screen. This scene does an amazing job immersing us as the audience and really making us feel like we're riding the sandworm for the first time. And Cody, you used the word epic. I think in a movie full of incredible set pieces, this is, in my opinion, the most epic one that we see. Other scenes in the film, like the Colosseum scene, for instance, we have thousands and thousands of characters in the crowd, and later with the battle scenes, those definitely feel epic too. But it's interesting because this one only involves one person, and I think that's why it truly has that epic feel. It's such a great contrast in terms of scale between Paul as a tiny human running on top of a sand dune and the huge sandworm that's like 1,000,000 times the size of him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really well said, Connor. It's funny that this scene actually kind of reminded me of something similar to the film Avatar, where Jake Sully has to domesticate and learn how to ride a winged creature called the Torok. I think that's
Yeah.
what it was called. I just feel like this scene in Dune Part 2 is way more successful in that there's a real sense of danger because we see those worms eat people alive.
Yeah.
And
right.
and there's that sense of scale that you mentioned as well. There's a tactile feel to all of this. It's not completely relying on CGI. And that's not a dig against Avatar by any means, but I just feel like this was a little more successful.
And there's something about that sandworm too. It's like you can't ever see the entire thing all at once. If you're standing on top of that thing, it's only like a part of it. And the way it's just moving so fast, it's like you're just holding on for dear life. You really get a sense of it in this scene.
Yeah.
And Connor, as you mentioned, it was kind of a tough decision to decide between the Colosseum scene and the sandworm riding scene. But I think it helped to know that in a recent interview, Villeneuve actually described this as his favorite scene as well from the movie.
Yeah.
He said that he had to, quote, imagine the technique of how Paul will physically jump on a worm, making that look real, dangerous, edgy, possible. It required a tremendous amount of time and research and development. It was by far the most complex sequence I've ever done in my life. I didn't want to compromise at all, unquote.
Wow, that's really telling. Like him saying by far the most complex sequence he's ever done in his life. And this coming from the same guy who's made Blade Runner 2049, Dune Part 1, Arrival. Like it's some really complex movies from a technology
for sure.
standpoint.
Absolutely, yeah. And it definitely shows in this scene in its blend of practical effects and CG. And I think that leads us to the team that made this sequence possible.
Yeah, one of my favorite things I've been reading about is that because this scene was so demanding and involved, Villeneuve and his crew created their own specialized team called the Worm Unit to tackle it. And I love the name Worm Unit. It sounds like one of those 90s knockoffs of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Biker Mice from Mars, Street Sharks, something just weird like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's very visual. And Connor, wouldn't you love to see the crew gear they designed for Worm Unit?
Oh, yeah.
I really hope that's a real thing that they did. I feel like if not, you should like do it.
Worm Unit. Yeah, I love it.
So Worm Unit was led by producer Tanya Lapointe, who is actually married to Villeneuve.
Oh,
and
cool.
Villeneuve mentioned that, quote, I needed someone I have ultimate communication with. And having the strong communication between both units, I was able to direct both units at the same time, which was quite a crazy thing to do, unquote. It seems like the shorthand between life partners would have been a huge benefit for something of this scale and this complicated.
Yeah.
And Chalamet actually described shooting with Worm Unit as a, quote, going up this ladder onto a platform and getting on a little slab of worm that they built practically at scale, unquote. And apparently they also had to deal with an industrial fan blowing sand into their faces while riding on this gimbal, which actually helped evoke a sense of real adrenaline.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, and you can feel the way that they did it practically translates into that immersive experience on the screen. So I was reading for the practical aspect, Worm Unit worked 2 months in Budapest on a set before relocating to Abu Dhabi and Jordan to shoot in the desert with those real sand dunes that we're seeing in the scene.
Wow.
So the production designer, Patrice Vermette, mentioned that Abu Dhabi was used for that sprawling sand and classic dune shot, while Jordan was used for the rocky canyons that we see.
Yeah, and I read that not only in this scene, but for all of part 2, entirely new areas of desert were chosen on location recce's so as not to repeat set pieces from Dune Part 1. They wanted this all to feel really distinct from the first film. So just, speaking to that
That's
level
cool.
of detail they approached this with.
Yeah, that's super interesting. What did you guys think of the design of the sandworms themselves?
I thought like the flaps are really weird. I don't know what else to call them, but when the hooks grab onto them, it's like a big hairy nostril that gets revealed with like nose hairs inside. What did you think the worm skin feels like? I mean, is it like rough or is it soft? I don't know if you had something in your head after watching it.
Yeah, I don't like when you think of a worm, you think kind of like slimy, I
Yeah.
guess, but I don't think it's that. I think it's hard on the outside and scaled because it's so protected. But those flaps you mentioned, Connor, in the book are what Herbert describes as the, quote, soft inner lapping of its ring segment, unquote. And riders, they use their hooks to expose that lapping so that the worms don't burrow or turn over and then like bury the rider in the sand or kill them.
Got it.
Herbert also mentions that they have features of a lamprey, and that definitely refers to the circular pattern of the teeth if you look up an image of a lamprey.
Yeah, right.
And then he also goes into detail about how tough the sandworms are, and only atomic weapons could really kill a full worm because traditional explosives would just destroy those ring segments of their body that I mentioned, which I guess can regenerate almost like a real worm or like a cockroach or something.
Wow.
So this is all really well visualized by the team. in what otherwise was just kind of like a book description.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of cuts to those flaps you talked about that imply that Paul can essentially steer the worm by using those.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of cool props in this scene as well. Of course, we're
Mhm.
familiar with the thumpers,
Yeah.
and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second here. But the maker hooks that Paul uses have some really nice detail as well. They almost look like ice climbing axes, and he's able to
Mhm.
extend them almost like he's fly fishing.
Yeah.
And of course, we need to mention Jacqueline West's incredible costumes. We got a peek at them in Dune Part 1, but we're seeing all these characters in Fremen still suits, but each of them have their own distinct details. Like if you caught that Paul and Stilgar are wearing different types of shrouds on their heads. Paul has a really cool set of goggles that we're seeing for this worm ride to keep the sand out of his eyes. Just some great little costume choices that help sell this scene.
Totally, Connor. And fun detail about, and let me just push up the glasses to the brim of my nose here. Chani's blue headband. So in the book, it's called a Nizhoni scarf.
Oh,
And the Fremen wear it to symbolize motherhood and birth. And in the movie, an entire plot line about Chani giving birth to Paul's son was actually cut
oh,
just to streamline everything.
uh-huh.
So the blue headband is just a cool little nod to that symbolic garment in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it also just gives Zendaya a memorable flash of this saturated color in a sea of, otherwise beige earth tones.
Yeah, uh-huh.
So that was just kind of a cool detail to see.
Cody, you're kind of the gadget guy. I was going to ask, what did you think of the tactile feel and clicking of the worm attracting thumper device?
Yeah, I love it. And we'll get into it with sound design for sure, but just the way it functions, it's so, like you said, so mechanical and tactile.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it might be one of my first choices if I got to like raid the props department and bring something
Yeah.
home. Like
That's
that might
cool.
be what I choose. Yeah.
It's so compact too for like the
Hmm.
effect that it creates. It's a very efficient little device.
Yeah, definitely. And then capturing all of these props and production design, can't do it at all without the camera team, without the cinematographer. Let's talk about the look of the film through Greig Fraser's cinematography.
So what this scene balances really well visually is giving us some different shot types. We're getting those tight, close, intimate moments where we might be seeing Paul trying to find his footing on the sandworm, or his hand trying to use a maker hook to get a good grip, to really ground us in the enormous scale of the scene. And it's all set against those huge sweeping aerial shots as well. So we're bouncing back and forth from like these close-up moments to these very, very zoomed out moments.
Yep.
I think it's also worth mentioning that speed plays a huge role in this scene too. We
Uh-huh.
go from the quiet anticipation of Paul waiting for the worm atop the sand dune to the adrenaline of riding the sandworm at full speed. We're seeing sand getting kicked up from the worm, and there's so much of it that the sun is actually obscured and drowned out in a few shots.
Mm-hmm.
There is this sense of helplessness when Paul makes his jump before that pillar of sand folds beneath him. The camera is
Yeah.
definitely engulfed in sand, and you can tell he's really at the mercy of the elements until he's able to actually, grapple and dig the hooks into the worm.
And I love the periodic use of the wide shot of Paul and Stilgar as they
Right.
trek into the sand, just to give the audience a sense of scale. We almost see their footsteps. We realize how tiny they really are in this vast desert landscape.
hmm There's also a lot of different positional changes of Paul in the shots when he actually gets on top of the worm. I think it really adds to the disorienting feeling of trying to not only ride this enormous beast, but also simply survive. In one shot, we see him lying flat on his back, horizontal in frame, from a low perspective at the front of his legs. And then in another shot, we see a close up of his face, and he's more vertically in frame. So it just kind of keeps changing, and you never get really comfortable with this whole process.
Yeah, and my favorite moment of the scene are the guess I'll call them cannons of sand being blown into frame, and Paul's attempts to like stand up on the worm in the face of all of these, wild elements of the desert.
Yeah, this is all working towards that illusion of speed that you guys are talking about. And it actually reminded me of something like Spielberg's film Duel, very similar title, where they could only shoot the truck at about 30 miles per hour, but the way it was shot is what really sold the concept of a high-speed chase. And that wind, sand, and spice hitting Paul really sells the speed.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to talk a little bit about the tools of the trade that Greig Fraser chose here to make this all happen. He won an Oscar for his work in Part 1, and on this film, he chose to use the Arri Alexa 65 and Alexa Mini LF cameras, the 65 in the prior referring to the image area that's being captured, and it's kind of the equivalent of 65 millimeter 5 perf film. And that's all to say that there's a ton of resolution and detail captured, and it allowed the team to use all of that raw information to format different theatrical experiences like IMAX and kind of specialize it for different screens. Fraser also likes to give his images a lot of texture. He shot on a variety of lenses with vintage optics. There were some like Soviet era glass in there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just such incredible looks and compositions in this movie. This scene is really a masterclass in contrast, the contrast of scale and contrast of light and shadow, using the sun to play with silhouettes and the actual sand dunes kind of splitting the frame down the middle between that light and darkness. I was totally floored by the super wide shots of Paul sprinting on the ridge of that dune. So huge props to Greig Fraser and all of his collaborators for making this sci-fi world feel so vivid and lived in with these images.
Definitely. The look is incredible. And I think the other piece of this is Timothée Chalamet having to really sell this with his performance. So how does Timothy sell the fear and adrenaline? It must be really hard to run on that sand ridge.
Definitely. Like you think of like running on the beach or even like walking on sand and just seeing those wide shots of him sprinting. I think he really sells it.
And also just to mention, what we're seeing is probably a mix between Timothée Chalamet and stunt performer Lawrence Hideyoshi performing some of those bigger moments like the jump onto the Sandworm, for instance.
Yeah. So digging more into some performances in the scene, Stilgar and Paul's conversation at the beginning about, quote, keeping it simple, unquote, does happen in the novel, but the performances here are what really sell that conversation and turn it into almost more of a comedic beat that they even use in the trailers. These performances sell that bond between Stilgar and Paul and sort of depict all the different emotions that come with this rite of passage that Paul has to face.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of comedy in the scene, a lot of tension, just a mix of different emotions.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to talk about Bardem for a little bit here because I really feel like he stole the show in some ways. I was really impressed with his comedic timing because it's my understanding that the book isn't necessarily funny per se. So he brings a much needed levity to the movie.
Yeah.
And I also appreciated the tight close-ups on Bardem's face because it's hard to believe, but he was actually 38 when he portrayed Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men.
Wow.
And he is now 55 years old, even though it doesn't feel that long ago. And he just brings a lot of age and wisdom to his face on those close-ups. He's like this authority figure with the appropriate amount of gravitas. I really enjoyed him in this movie.
Yeah, he's such an incredible actor, and his range, like you said, is really impressive.
Oh, absolutely. He's incredible. And we also get a lot of great sort of more background side character performances here. We touched on it briefly earlier, but as Paul rides the worm and is now irrefutably the Mahdi prophet, We have a lot of great performances from this group of Fremen around him reacting to his ride and eventually even like chanting his name, almost as if they now have the proof that they need, that they should worship him as a prophet. And Zendaya and Bardem's facial expressions kind of say everything we need to know about what state they're in as a result of Paul's ride. They're in very different places. Bardem being an admirer, Zendaya being really skeptical of all these people worshiping him. Great facial expressions to show that. Not a lot of dialogue.
And to add to that, Cody, I also like that as an audience, we kind of rely on the Fremen's facial expressions to get that kind of expert opinion, right? We rely on them to know how dangerous this particular worm that Paul
Yeah.
attracts is. It's bigger than expected. And also when they start cheering together at the end, you just know how amazing this feat that he pulled off was.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I have to say that both Javier Bardem and Timothée Chalamet, they pull off that sandworm walking without it looking completely ridiculous. There's like this dance-like quality to it that makes it super fun, that irregular rhythmic pattern of walking.
Right. Yeah, I love that.
And Connor, speaking of that rhythmic walking, there's a lot of rhythm and movement and sound atmosphere in this film. It's honestly probably my favorite part of both the first film and this film because of its immersion. Mark, what do you think of the use of score in the scene?
We don't get too much score. I think it enters the scene about 2/3 of the way through it. But prior to that, we get a lot of focus on Paul's breathing as he prepares the sandworm thumper device. And I couldn't help but relate to the feeling of, preparing for a presentation or some other important event, and you're kind of just left with nothing but your thoughts and you're just kind of talking to yourself. And so there's a
Yeah.
lot of focus on that. And I feel like it adds a layer of relatability to Timothée Chalamet's character. And I also really liked that when the score kicks in, it kind of starts with this flickering sound to kind of mimic the sand getting kicked up. If you
Yeah.
listen to the actual track itself, it's almost difficult to discern the score from the sound effects because they bleed into each other at first. And then we get this kind of swell that happens once Paul gets onto his feet. And I don't know about you guys, but I just feel like that combined with the Fremen roaring
Oh, yeah.
when he completes this, it was just a magical movie moment for me.
Totally. Yeah, we hear that classic Dune war cry sung by Loire Cotler. And I know, Mark, maybe you felt like it was a little overused in part one, that classic, musical cue, but I think it was really used effectively here.
Yeah, I'd say for the first movie, I noticed that those like war cry musical motifs that would play, they almost felt like they were overused in the first one. And I know that the score itself is outstanding, but that was one thing in the first film that just bothered me a little bit, just because I felt like it forced its hand and really kind of made the audience realize that like whatever just took place was a big moment rather than, just experiencing it as it happened.
Fair enough. I think this is it the only instance where this is used in part two?
It might be one of the only ones that I remembered at
it's
least.
It's used very sparingly, as you pointed out, Mark, but I think it works. You see him visually like get to his feet, and I feel like it is that kind of extra punch that you need. It's pretty nice.
Yeah. I also really like that once the thumper drum device is activated, it gives this pulse and then a resultant reverberation in the sand.
Yeah.
And it almost acts like a surrogate for a heartbeat, which just adds to another layer of increasing tension of the scene. And then the sound of the actual sandworm approaching almost kind of sounded to me like an airplane and helicopter flying directly over you, while also being right next to like a roaring waterfall at the same time.
Yeah, Mark, that's probably one of my favorite sounds in the entire film is that sandworm plowing into the side of the dune underneath Paul. There's this bassy, explosive hit. I would almost describe it as like this powerful groan that it's almost like part machine, part monster. And we also get a sense of the speed, as you guys mentioned earlier, because the sandworm is moving fast, and you get all of the immersive sound design of the whipping wind and particles. And this is all intricately designed by supervising sound editor on part 2, Richard King, and his team. I
Wow.
think that his team really carried the torch well from part 1.
Yeah.
Like the sound of that thumper against the hollow drum sand taken from part 1 and kind of expanded. They just really did a phenomenal job of immersing us in this world. And I think the sound design is more notable in this film than like many others that come out routinely.
Mm-hmm. And just going back a bit, like there again is a really great contrast in this scene, not only visually, but through the sound. It starts completely silent. There's almost no desert atmosphere. Like Mark, you were saying, you're just kind of alone with your thoughts. And it helps build up that sense of anticipation and really makes, the sandworm moment all that more powerful. We literally get whacked in the chest with that wall of sound. So again, don't just go see this in IMAX, but consider maybe seeing it in a Dolby theater or something that you can really get that sound component when you watch.
Yeah, that's how I experienced the film, in a Dolby cinema. And
awesome.
It was unbelievable during these scenes, being kind of like rattled in your chair physically, and it just like cracking your sternum like with the sound. It was just like, this is almost too loud, but no, I'm loving it. Crank it up. Well, yeah, we've got our wonderful sound. We've got all our visual components coming together on the film. I think from a craft and theme perspective, this was the perfect scene to choose in the film. I know we all absolutely loved it. We know Villeneuve is proud and loved it. Do you guys have any final thoughts on the scene or the film?
I can't wait to rewatch this. I'll just start with that. And my wife hasn't seen it yet, so I'm, already looking forward to seeing this again. Like I said, I'm hoping to watch it again in a Dolby theater near us, but I really need to rewatch Dune Part 1 first. I want to compare that to seeing my experience of Dune Part 2 when I didn't have anything fresh in my head, and just see what kind of difference that makes for me.
Part of what makes this experience special is like all the different ways that you can approach it.
Yeah.
Whether that's with the source material or just using the first film as reference. And I'm just going to go ahead and mirror my little letterbox review for the film after I saw it, and just say that Dune Part 2, to me, it's sort of like the Kwisatz Haderach of huge tentpole movies. It's really the chosen one for me, because it's sort of a prophetic miracle that continues to push filmgoers towards strange sci-fi concepts while also being truly entertaining with mainstream appeal. It really bridges those two areas that on a lot of films previously felt impossible to balance. It was either like too weird and out there, maybe as David Lynch's version of Dune as an example, or it's just too commercial and not weird enough.
Yeah.
So here's hoping that we get at least one more film in the series, and for more and more readers to immerse themselves in Frank Herbert's legendary novel as a result.
Yeah, well said.
And now that we've broken down the riding the sandworm scene in detail, we'd like to welcome on our guest, Oscar-winning cinematographer Greig Fraser, for his pro take on Dune Part 2.
Amateur or professional?
Professional.
Hi, Greig. Thank you so much for joining us here on Scenecraft.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We wanted to kind of start off by asking you how you approached shooting a sequel to a film series, balancing that visual continuity from Dune Part 1 while also bringing a new format and imagery to Part 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, because I could actually argue that it's not really a sequel, even though it's a Part 2. Like, I think I would have thought that if we were approaching the sequel, that it may have been slightly different to us approaching a Part 2. I think that with the sequel, you could probably take a few more liberties when it comes to changing up the visual style.
Yeah.
I think given that it's a Part 2 of a bigger story, that we were probably a little bit more bound by what had come before we definitely did discuss mixing it up. That was definitely a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we realized that it kind of needed to have a rhyme and a rhythm to part one, so that if you were watching it as one entity, which, listen, I think people are going to do that. They are now, in the cinemas. I've heard stories of people watching part one on their Blu-ray and then going straight to the cinema to watch part two.
Mm-hmm.
So, you don't really want to upset that flow too much, but you also, at the same time, don't want to rehash part one. Like, that's not fun for anyone, including us as filmmakers. Like,
Sure.
we want to push the boundaries a bit more too. So, having it rhythm and rhyme is really important. If we ever get to do a sequel to this story, which some would call part three or some would call something else,
Mm-hmm.
then, who knows what that may look like. That may be, all bets are off at that point, aren't they? Like, we could probably mix it up a lot.
Amazing. Yeah, well, we are absolutely hoping for it. And digging into the writing the sandworm scene of the film specifically, it's such an impressive hybrid of practical set piece and CG elements, and it all feels incredibly real. How did working with a dedicated worm unit improve the experience of shooting the scene for you? And how did you and Denis decide where to put the camera and simulate that speed and scale of the worm in the scene?
Well, yeah, they're two very important questions, because traditionally on a film, let's say, like, if you run a film like you would run a spreadsheet, which is, how some people do run a film, like, where you say, okay, each minute of this movie takes this amount of shooting time, or costs this amount of money, because, anybody that knows anything about the film business know there is a formula to work out how long things should take to shoot, or how they should be shot.
Mm-hmm.
Over the last sort of 10, 15, 20 years of this scale of film, a sequence like that would be traditionally punted over to a second unit and be fully shot by a second unit, and fully realized by a whole other crew, by a whole other director, by a whole other DP, and you use a stunt person up until you see a close-up of the actor, and you'd spend half a day with the actor, and you'd plug in a couple of close-ups, and, you'd all go home.
Mm-hmm.
We decided very early on that this was, well, obviously this is too important a scene to hand over to anybody.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I couldn't brief a DP to do this. I didn't know how to do it. Literally, like, I've never seen anyone write a sandworm. I just genuinely don't know how to. I genuinely did not know how to shoot a sandworm, and because I've never seen it, so we had to really delve deep into the references for things that we might understand as being of that scale. Small people on really large things. So I looked at things like skiers sort of going off piste down mountains.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at skiers in the midst of avalanches. I looked at surfers on massive waves. I looked at surfers crashing through the water and nearly drowning, and like, we looked at how those things are shot. Now, a lot of those things are shot with GoPros, so that was not the look we were after on this. We were looking at how to shoot that not with the GoPro cam, with the camera strapped to the head or camera strapped to somebody else. So we need to become cinematic, but we also need to help show that scale. So a very, very simple set of rules came through. We had to be logical with how we were seeing this character. We either had to be with him, so we either had to be over his shoulder and standing behind him, or sliding behind him, or running behind him, or whatever that might entail. Like, we had to be physically on the worm. And we had to logically think, okay, well, how physically could we shoot this if we were shooting a person on a whale?
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say we had a mechanical whale and we could control that. Like, how would we shoot that to not make it look like a CG effect? And so we had to be very careful to make sure that we were honest with our camera positions, and like, we wouldn't choose a lens that you couldn't get a helicopter close to. Like, we weren't going to be a wide lens, just above his head because, well, how do you get the shot? I mean, so if we did go above or along, alongside, would either be close and wider, as if we're standing on the worm with him, or we would be long and long lens, as if we were in a tracking vehicle, or we had this idea of a tracking worm. It's a great vision, actually. Just I'd love to see somebody build a tracking worm with with a tracking arm on a worm.
Right.
That would kind of be so Dune, wouldn't that? If there was a tracking arm and a remote head on a worm. That was kind of the thinking. So it was very tricky because you have a lot of things. It's like gravity, and gravity is a tricky thing. When the worm's going straight down, he's got to be hanging in such a way that you believe him. But going back to kind of the process of a worm unit, and that's where it became really important that we set up a unit for that purpose. And we were very fortunate enough that Denis' partner and executive producer, Tanya Lapointe, put her hand up to sort of sit in the director's chair, really.
Mm-hmm.
And she acted as a conduit for Denis. And Christophe Brand, who was my cinematographer for that, kind of acted as a conduit for me. So, we'd be broadcast images and, we're at the same studio, but we'd be seeing what they were doing. We'd hear if they had a a take that they were happy with. We'd look at it. We'd look at either the rehearsal or look at the take. We'd assess it. We'd make changes to it. Yeah, it was a very refined process. And it really took a lot of dedication on their behalf to be stubborn enough to get it 100% right. And had we been following the traditional model of filmmaking, where 3 days were dedicated to the worm ride because it's a 2-page scene or whatever the thing might be, that it would have nearly been as interesting as it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like there were shots in that sequence that when the sand starts collapsing, for example, it took days. We took multiple takes to get that. And we were able to do it because we had great scheduling. We had a really dogged director and worm unit director and DP, and we had a great team that could actually get behind it and not accept almost good enough.
Yeah.
Like every shot is 100% as we want it, and I don't know, I still get a buzz watching that. It's a fantastic sequence. It's one of my favorite that I've been involved with.
Yeah, I mean it absolutely pays off, and to your point, you can tell the kind of streamlined yet meticulous nature of approaching the shoot. It absolutely shows. It's like a perfect sequence. So
yeah, well, and that's the thing. I mean, Denis storyboards everything as he's said, and he storyboarded that sequence really intimately, and he'd clearly worked out how to write a sandworm. I don't know if he did that when he was 13 or he did it when he was 43 or but he's figured out how to write a sandworm.
Yeah.
And it was such a great meeting. I remember we all had this meeting when he first presented the boards to us, and it's that classic thing where you get to the end of the boards and everybody's like, oh, okay, like that's amazing. And how the heck do we do that? That's the challenge. There's like silence. There's silence. Everyone going, okay, all right, let's get on with it.
Going off of that, I just wanted to ask, did you have any favorite ways to add texture and dirty up the inherently clean look of shooting on a digital large format?
That is a good question, because that is kind of something that I try and do a lot. I've kind of feel like I've come full circle. I started shooting on film. We went to digital. I felt the digital was starting to get a bit too clean, but too refined.
Yeah.
And I'm personally on a bit of a tear back towards a textured look that, it makes sense. Like as technology gets better and better and better, everybody that builds the technology for us, which I am very, very, grateful for, because there are people out there who are making our tools better and better for us.
Yeah.
So I'm eternally grateful to those people. The flip side of that compliment sandwich that I'm about to get into is that because they're making them so good, that actually what you lose is a lot of the inherent beauty of cinema. And there is a big debate, even in DP circles, about
Mhm.
You want to leave the cinema like almost clearing out your boots of sand. You know, it's what I wanted to feel like.
Absolutely. Yeah. It
Mhm.
is kind of that perfect balance of the benefits of digital, but still feeling very analog and interesting. So yeah, we absolutely
Yeah.
loved that. Yeah.
What I love about the film out process in general is that, you know, going back to what I referred to as the two sides of the coin, which is the massive divide between film and digital. There is a massive chasm in there between those two, and you know, often you get asked to shoot digitally without doing anything to it. So the only tools you have to dirty it up is lenses and LUT, you know, which is the LUT's a digital artifice, and the lenses can, you know, the lenses can go too far the other way where they can become too soft. But the ability to put a film process in the middle instead of at the beginning means that your options open up 1,000-fold.
Wow.
About the type of film that you go to, the way that you process it, the size that you process it to, the amount of times you contact print it. There are massive number of options that you have if you stick film in the middle of it.
Well, the amalgamation of all these elements, you've captured something truly spectacular and unique.
Thank
So
you very
it's
much.
amazing.
Thank you.
One of our favorite sequences in the film is that really strong opening action set piece where we're seeing the Harkonnens jump off of the ridge of a dune and float up the side of a rock face.
Yep.
So that floating effect is so unique because it almost doesn't feel like they're on wires. It really feels like they have some sort of anti-gravitational device. So we were curious how that wire work happened and what you did with the camera to kind of match that floating movement.
I mean, I wish I could tell you that I was gonna try and fool you for a second.
Yeah,
And go,
right.
we built an anti-gravitational device.
Right.
Yes, wires. Again, I will say this: that we had an incredibly dedicated crew, like our stunt coordinator Lee Morrison. They worked all this stuff out. Obviously, it's wire work, but it doesn't feel like wire work. And part of the reason is because that shot holds longer. Like they take off and they go, and they go, and they go, and they go, far beyond what one would be used to seeing for wire work. But then there's shots of them coming up over the ridge where they kind of push off the rock, and it feels like it gives them acceleration. The wire work's magnificent. Like I'll give it to the team because that wire work is refined and it's subtle, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And when they do come over the top of that ridge and finally land, the camera kind of tracks backward with that same floating effect.
Yep.
Was that just Steadicam?
No, it's a crane. It's too close to the edge of the cliff. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We weren't going to put anyone close to that.
Oh, absolutely.
So
yeah, it's a crane.
That's getting a crane onto a ridge in advance, laying it out, and yes, that's a crane.
Wow.
I love that sequence because it reminds me of a fantastic 70s sci-fi film that I remember seeing as a kid. Like, you know, those kind of cool sci-fis that you used to see. And
yep.
I don't know, it reminds me of something very raw and very visceral.
As we're talking about some of our favorite scenes, we're so curious to know about the infrared imagery used in the Colosseum sequence. It works so well visually, but it also, on a thematic level, reflects the stark condition of the planet and its brutal culture found there,
Yep.
which is perfectly adapted from the novel. What was the process of developing that look?
I've been playing with infrared light since Zero Dark 30.
Mm.
On Zero Dark 30, what I discovered was that those infrared devices that you put attached to the camera to make it look like you're wearing night vision goggles actually see infrared. And so I've been playing with kind of the idea that these cameras can see a different wavelength, and we can light it where one camera doesn't see a light, the other camera does see a light.
Wow.
And so when Denis suggested we shoot this black and white because of the Harkonnen sun not emitting light, I'm like, oh, okay, I've got the best. I want to try this. I want to test this. And this was like, this is narratively appropriate, and it's actually totally the opportunity to shoot this. And so we did. We shot it outside with real sun, because as everybody knows, real sun has infrared. We cut all the visible light, so you don't see any colors on the camera, and then all the camera saw was infrared.
Wow.
So yeah, it seems like the right time to pull it out of the bag of tricks. Put it that way.
Yeah.
It wasn't a gratuitous look thing. It seemed to suit it. It did pose some other issues. Like, for example, we shot the box, the Baron's box and Lady Fennering's box. We for all those scenes, including the door opening with Faye, we shot those things with 3D cameras.
Oh,
as we come out of the hallway, we're tracking with the Baron and we're tracking with the Bene Gesserit ladies. It's color in the background where there's artificial light,
right,
or where you assume there's artificial light in a hallway or the back of the box. But it goes from color to black and white, and so we had two cameras, which was one camera was a normal Alexa, and the other camera was the IR Alexa.
Oh,
but
God.
To get a little bit geeky on it for a sec, we had to actually light it in such a way because the infrared camera did not see my LED lights. So we had to light it with tungsten light instead of LEDs, because tungsten, as any young scientist knows, tungsten has so much infrared. Like, it puts out most of the energy coming from a tungsten light is actually invisible light. So we had to use tungsten to be able to see with the infrared camera.
Wow.
So it was the only set we had with tungsten, really.
Oh my God. Incredible. So looking back on your Dune Part 2 experience, your shoot as a whole, do you have a single favorite shot or a favorite sequence from the entire film?
I tell you what, I do love, there's something beautiful about the nod to Lawrence of Arabia there with him walking from the black sands in the south. Like, there's that long lens. I mean, it's such a powerful concept, that Lawrence of Arabia shot in their movie, Lawrence of Arabia, that for us to find a twist on that, with Paul, with the heat waves, with the rocks in the foreground, with the worm in the background. Like, it's, for me, I think it's a really powerful image that sort of harkens back to our collective visual consciousness as a film community. We don't necessarily need to make that assessment when we're watching it. Oh, that's Lawrence. Oh, that's a reference.
Yes.
But I think we know what that means. And I just love the way we got it. I loved it. It was a small unit. We had 4 people. We drove Timothy 22 miles in north, wherever he went. We had him on an earpiece. We asked him to walk towards us, and he didn't know where we were because he couldn't see us. And, he just started walking, and we're like, no, go left. Okay. No, other left. Okay, yeah, good. Straight ahead. No, you're veering to the right. Okay, go. Okay, good. He was miles away, and we were 3 of us on a rock outcropping 6 hours from Aqaba on a Saturday. But this film, for me, this is testament to Denis' choices for collaborators, from production design through to VFX, through to sound, through to score. The whole film for me has an impact beyond the images.
Well, thank you, Greig. We are so grateful to talk with you about your huge achievement in cinematography on Dune Part 2, and a huge congratulations to you and the whole team on the film's success.
Thank you very much. Awesome to chat.
Thanks, Greig.
Thank you again to Greig Fraser for his pro take on Dune Part 2, and thank you to our listeners and fellow movie enthusiasts for reliving this scene with us. Do you have a favorite scene from Dune Part 2? You can email us at contact@scenecraftpodcast.com with any of your thoughts or comments, or follow us on Instagram, X, TikTok, or Threads @Scenecraft Podcast for any scheduling updates and news. You can support the podcast by leaving us a review or star rating on your platform of choice. A very special thanks to Jordan Summerlad for our theme music. This has been Scenecraft, where we break down the craft behind our favorite scenes. See you all next time.